thank you for joining us for this special edition of the Parent Lunch and Learn. Over the past few weeks, we've had numerous conversations with parents, teachers, and school counselors with regards to the impact of a pandemic, a war, economic instability, and so much more on our children and children in the community. And so as the Children's Grief Centre is responsive, we thought we would address that issue at a wider level, thinking that if a few people had those questions and those wonderings, it's very likely that many of us do. And so today we'll explore what does it look like? What does it feel like to be grieving in an uncertain world? And how can we best support the children, young people in our lives? So that's the main question we'll be dealing with today. How do I support my grieving child or teen in a world that feels so uncertain and unstable? The pandemic is something we've been dealing with for 2 years, and as of today, we're still unsure what that's going to look like in the next weeks and months and years. There's a war going on in Ukraine, and it's impacting everybody. And there's so many other conflicts and uncertainties that are bringing a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And we know nothing exists on its own. All of these different experiences come together and sometimes can make it pretty big and feel pretty overwhelming. And so today we'll focus on the following. We're going to take the pulse. How do we do that, and what does that look like? We're going to look at information and information management. So what information are we getting? How are we getting it? And what does it feel like? And then we'll focus on the communications 3 C's. So the communication piece, the conversation, the connection, and comfort. And then we'll end with some support, ideas of how we do that. How do we bring some sense of safety and stability in our children's lives? So we're going to need to take the pulse. First of all, our own pulse. It's hard. We're feeling overwhelmed. We're feeling exhausted. We have a diminished sense of capacity to face hard stuff, to face conflict and fear, the unpredictability. And it likely feels like our window of tolerance, and we've used that term before if you've attended Lunch and Learns, our window of tolerance keeps getting smaller and smaller. And I often think of it as the pressures from the outside, the fear, the uncertainty, the unpredictability, the stress, all of that is putting pressure, which makes our window of tolerance much smaller. Of course, there's the internal pressures, there's the internal dialogue and the things that we're experiencing ourselves, and that also impacts how much we're able to interact with the world and what that looks like when we do. I think it's important for us to not assume that our children are also overwhelmed and struggling like we are. It's a great thing that we think. If we're feeling a little stressed by things, if we're feeling really stressed by things, or if we're confused, that it's likely happening to others. That's most of the time, that's absolutely true. But our children may not be feeling the same way as we are. They may not be experiencing it the same way as we do. And so it's important that we check our assumptions and that we check in with them, and in a second we'll look at how we do that check. Is it possible that they're also overwhelmed? Absolutely. Is it possible that they're feeling that in a very different way? Absolutely. And so we're going to check in on that. We don't want to go in with all of our strategies and to talk about the deep, disturbing things if that's not where they at. So we're going to want to do that sort of serve and receive, and just come in at the level that they're at as well. That's going to be the most helpful to them, and it's actually going to feel really good to us. It's going to feel congruent. It's going to feel like we're being responsive, and that's what we're looking at. So how do we know where they're at? How are we going to know? Aside from the obvious, the things that they say, so we can pick up on that, obviously. But we're also going to look in the things they don't say. You may expect that when you have a conversation, they would speak, and they would have an opinion about something. It may be that with your teenager, you've had conversations about politics and conflicts in the world, and you would expect them to come in with some arguments, and they're not. And so we're going to pay attention to that. We're also going to pay attention to their behavior and how they're moving, and how their body is leaning in or leaning out, or are they becoming a shadow of themselves? Or it could also be that they have really big energy. And some children show up like that. Sometimes we show up like that when we're stressed or overwhelmed, or we may just be retreating within ourselves. And sometimes we do that, and some of us do that more. And sometimes when we're heightened by all these experiences, we show up big and with big energy, and maybe we don't stop talking. We'll notice that we're having a conversation with a friend, and we'll just pause and say, oh my goodness, I've been talking nonstop for 10 minutes at a rate that has been like I'm running a sprint here. I'm going to take a breath. What's going on here? So we're also going to notice that. So we're going to do a whole lot of noticing. We're going to play detectives. We're going to gather clues as to how our children are coping with this. And the way that they're responding, one more thing, the way that they're responding, whether it's retreating or having big energy, it's serving them in the now. It might be that they're needing that time away to just be able to take it in, and be able to calm, and be able to think and reflect on things. So retreating is not bad. And having big energy and being out there and moving a lot, that's not bad either. We're kind of releasing some of that energy. We might be distracting ourselves from that, from the stress. So none of it is bad in itself. We're just going to pay attention to how it's showing up. Is it similar to how they show up normally? So noticing the difference here. And then paying attention to, is it actually serving them? So on the surface, the idea, our bodies and our brains do the things that serve them. But is it actually serving them? Or is it getting them in trouble? Or is it making other people really worry about them? So those are all things that we're going to sort of take in as we're taking the pulse. Yeah, like when there's a lot of things going on, the pandemic, the information that's coming our way, the information is changing all the time. And what's the impact of that? We're confused. Maybe it led us to being on Twitter all the time, or on the website, or on the news all the time, to make sure we had the latest information to know what we needed to do and what would keep us safe. It also is likely that you may have started that way, and then you have to give that up. It was just too much to deal with, too much information, and too confusing. And I think we've all heard, even the experts were confused in that time. So unless you're dealing with that day to day, it's likely a little part over here in everything you've got going on. It's really confusing. So the amount of information, the nature of the information, how confusing it is. And then if we add conflicts, we've had more and more conflict, even maybe in our families, in our communities, in our province, in the world, at different level. And that very likely has become quite unsettling for any of us. So the world didn't feel really safe with COVID. There was a lot of risk. There were threats to our health, to our people. And then there's threats of conflicts and war. And so all this information coming our way. We can help this. So doesn't mean that it's not happening, but we can help at the point where it's entering our world. So our exposure. In many years ago, when I would have conversations with professionals and parents, I would say, hey, limit the TV being on in your house. The continuous news, or just watching the news, and your children come in and they may pick up some parts of it. The images are just so powerful. We know that our brains retain images more than words. We'll replay words, we'll adapt them, they might transform, but images, they kind of have this imprint on our brain. And those are the images that might come back in the night as you're going to bed, or in the night in dreams or nightmares. And so I would have said, really limit that and limit that exposure to the news. Well, now the world has changed. We have news everywhere. Our children might be on iPads, and there might be pop-up of news from an app, and they may click on that. That can happen. There also, our older children, young teens, adults are on social media. They're on TikTok. And on those social media platforms, you may also get on your feed continuous information about things that are going on right now. And this is a first. Our children are confronted with first account of what's happening in Ukraine from children their own age. It's not bad. It is a call for help, and we absolutely understand why those children and teens and adults are doing that. But it means for our own children that it's really impacting them. It's really coming into their world. They're identifying with that. Their energy that goes towards that, their worries and fears that goes towards that. I'm not saying we don't engage with the news, and we have the privilege of removing ourselves from what's going on. What I'm saying is we have a choice of when we engage with information and how we do that. And so we may choose to do written news. So paper, whether it's on a tablet or it's on paper, a news app, or even social media, but something that's going to come to us in a moderate way. So maybe a title. And at that point, we can pause and say, is that something that I can, or I'm capable, or want to engage with further? And then we get to click on that and then go to the next piece. And usually in the way that media is online right now, there's often links, and then we can go to that link, or we have to press play for a video. Let's give ourselves the pause and the time to question, do I want to go further? Is that something I can engage with? Is it right now? Or maybe later on I can engage with it. So asking ourselves the questions of how much we are able to be exposed to this information is really helpful in this information overload. We're getting so much information. There's just a lot. Our brains are being bombarded by information from the outside, and also from our bodies. Our bodies are sending information to our brains. This doesn't feel good. Too many people. I'm feeling a headache. I can't, or this doesn't feel comfortable. Our bodies are also sending messages to our brain, and our brains are feeling like there's just too many tabs open. And then we can ask ourselves, is it that we're crumbling under the amount of information? Is it that we're struggling with constantly changing information? Is it that the information itself is disturbing? And so as we limit the information, that's going to help our brains and our bodies. So our bodies do feel tired and exhausted and less capable from being overwhelmed. So let's talk about the 3 C's. So we're making some decisions for ourselves about what information we're engaging with. Our children are also going to engage with some of that information. And the bridge for me, I use the bridge all the time as a way of reaching, right? So it might be that our children have moved away from us a little bit physically, or in the way that they are acting. It may be that we have different thoughts about things, and we may be standing on either side of the stream or the river. Maybe that's getting a bit wider. And so we're going to want to reach out. So I like to think of a bridge. Back to my piece before about listening to what's not being said. It's so important. The words are important, but also what's not being spoken is going to tell us a whole lot. So in our check-ins with our children, our teens, our students even, we're going to pay attention to what they've heard. We're going to be curious. So before we start giving information and telling, don't engage with that and don't watch this, we're going to be curious about what they've heard, pandemic, the war, whatever's going on. And what do they understand about that? So that's going to give us some clues about what level they're at. Are they, with younger children, conflict may relate to sharing, or in the schoolyard, and conflict there. For older kids, they may understand conflicts at the world level and political state of the world, or certain areas of the world. What questions do they have? That's also another clue for us. So they may understand all these things. They may say, I'm good with that. And this is what I understand and I'm good. Or this is what I understand or I don't understand. And why is this happening with this? And why are these people doing this? And then that gives us an in. Okay, so I'm not imposing then my views on things. You're asking some questions. And okay, I'm going to make note of that. These are questions you have. And then how do they feel about what's going on, about the information that they have? Again, another layer of information that it's given us about where they're at. In response to that, we're observing as we're coming into this conversation. We're observing their response as they're talking. Are they calm? Are they coming in closer to us? Are they pretty hard and combative? What does that look like for them? So that's not said. That's something that we're observing of them. Is that who they are normally? We have people who are just, every time they talk, it's like this big thing that they are so certain about, and others are more tentative. So paying attention to that as well. So we're listening to the words, we're listening to the tone, we're listening to what is not said, and then we're reflecting that, right? So it sounds to me like it's pretty confusing to you too. Sounds to me like you're getting information from all sorts of places and you're not quite sure what's what. Wow, yeah, you're hearing from this 14-year-old who's with his sister in Ukraine, and he's asking for help. And I can see that that's upsetting to you. Yeah, that's super hard and validating. Yeah, right. I know we're so confused, or it's so scary when things like that happen and we feel like the world is unstable. And we feel like even in our own, even many, many, many kilometers away, we're feeling threatened. We're feeling like the world is changed, and it's a little scary. And then we can share. I've been feeling sometimes so overwhelmed, and I listen and I stop. Like there are days where I don't check the news, and sometimes I feel bad about it because I think it's happening somewhere else. And am I being a bad person for not wanting to check in with that? But sometimes I just know that I can't. I've got these other things that I need to get involved with, and I'm tired. I feel like my body's so tired from all that's going on in 2 years of not really knowing. And I've talked to friends about it, and it's helpful when they tell me that they feel, similar ways. And have you been talking to some of your friends about it? Who do you talk to when that's happening? So also some of that sharing and modeling at the same time. So what we're wanting to do as we do these sort of 5 pieces of observing, listening, reflecting, validating, and sharing. And it might be that in a given time you can't quite fit in the 5. It might be that you need to focus really on the observing and listening. We need to make sure that it's age appropriate information. And so with, again, if it's a younger child, if we're talking about conflict or we're talking about the pandemic, we're using simpler terms. We're not, we're still telling the truth. That's always so important. We're just bringing it to a level that they understand, and we build on that. So, I always say, we don't just get one go at this. These are ongoing conversations. So we start here and we play with that. We use some experiences that they already have to compare and build on that. And then when they're older, we're also engaging at their level, at the understanding that they have about health, the understanding they have about risk. My own children would say, Mom, everybody's talking about this war in Ukraine and it's going to happen. And my response would be, well, yeah, but it's not happening right now. And I went back to them and said, I wasn't avoiding it. I just had so much on. I couldn't imagine that was going to happen. But they were already joining with some of that information. They were getting all sorts of information that I wasn't getting because they had different sources. And so that engaging with them too is super important. So once I said, okay, tell me more about what you're hearing and what's going on with the war and your fears around that, and what are you understanding? We were able to have a dialogue. And then were they still stressed about it? Absolutely. But it felt like the stress was shared, and we can then have conversations, and they felt like the door was open. And so having that open door to conversation is so important. And we are the ones who open that door. So we send clear signals when the door is closed, and we can also be very explicit about that door being open and these conversations being ongoing. An important piece, whether that's with a war or it's something horrible that's happened in our community, or a death even, when that's happening in our family or in our circles, I encourage that we talk about feelings, especially when we're sharing news of a death or there's, again, a conflict like there is right now, that we're focusing on the feelings rather than the specific circumstances or events or details. So yes, this is going on. How's that impacting you? What does that feel like? We can get caught up in the details, and we may be increasing stress, or then we get a little stuck in that seeking information sort of world pattern, if you want. And then we're not paying attention to what it feels like. So we need to keep connecting to what it feels like, because that's also going to give us indication that maybe there needs to be more information being shared at some point in this case. But we're really wanting to pay attention to the experience. There you go. To the experience of what's going on, as opposed to what's going on. So not facts about what's going on, but rather how it's being experienced on our children's perspective. I won't play this right now because I'm afraid we're going to run out of time, and I really want to fit this in your lunch break. But the ways that we talk with our children about the hard things and the good things and the soft things and the fun things can be, let's make it the way that we usually talk to our children. Sometimes it's those more serious conversations we have in the car because there's no other distractions, or because we're having that private time. In some families, that's a really good connecting time. And we can also do that as we're playing puzzles, as we're playing Lego. And Pears Goodyear Brown here gives an example about how you can place a Lego, for example, or a rock, or anything that's hard, in the middle of Play-Doh or something else that's soft. And we talk about the soft things. So as we're playing with it, and so that's also helping us regulate as we're playing with the Play-Doh, any of us. I, grab Play-Doh once in a while too, and to just kind of self-regulate. That helps me. And then in the middle of that, we're talking about the soft stuff and the fun stuff. And then we say, yeah, we're going to go look for the hard stuff. How hard is it to go find the hard stuff in there, the hard Lego? Okay, and then we get it out. And what's the hard Lego in your life right now? What's hard to talk about, or what's difficult? And so there's playful ways that we can have these conversations that don't feel like we're sitting across one another, looking each other in the eyes, and then having these serious conversations. Children have a hard time engaging with that. And so let's pay attention to how we have these conversations. So I'll invite you to go on YouTube and find the Excavating Hard Things from Paris Goodyear Brown of Nurture House. Again, just how we have these conversations and how we connect. So to have these conversations, we need to set up an atmosphere, a context, a setting that will allow for these conversations to happen. And so, it might be on a sofa and we have a cup of hot chocolate, and we're having a conversation, we're cozy. It may be that, sometimes we're really in our heads and we're getting stressed. And so we're actually going to go out and we're going to do some big movement stuff to release some of that energy. And as we're throwing the ball into the hoop, every time the ball goes in, we say something, or it doesn't need to be like that mechanical. It could just be natural and flowing as we go. But as we are engaging in movement, that can be a good way to talk. Look at how many people go for walks. I'm sure you do that too. Sometimes walk with a friend is like therapy. We get to talk about things, and there's something that's freeing about not looking each other in the eye, and that movement, that cadence of walking as well. So consider these ways of not only to set up conversation, like we need to connect with them. Otherwise, we're just going to talk from brain to brain, and that doesn't always work, especially when we're stressed and our window of tolerance is really small. So we need to engage, find ways of feeling in our bodies and feeling able to have that conversation, and then we kind of meet them there, and then we can have a conversation. So it might be that your together time is building Lego, or it could be that whatever that is, but remember to set that up to be able to open the brain for those conversations, and they will go much better, and we're much more open to new information and different perspectives too when we're doing that. So that connection, where we want to share and to present that that genuine presence, right? So if we're doing something together, if we set up the scene already, that's already giving us a signal that we're engaged with that, and it's giving them a signal that we're here and we're present. Trust, connection requires trust. It requires that that open door policy again, and the unconditional love and regard. It might be that if you're a teacher, it's not unconditional love, but it is that commitment to them and to being present for them and supporting them. And that goes a long way. But we need to have that relationship for that to happen. We need to build this sense of connection, this sense of safety. And when the world doesn't feel so safe, we're especially seeking relationships that are safe. We will feel safe in the world when people around us make us feel safe. And sometimes connection isn't, the hug, or isn't, the physical presence. It's the presence. So, many of us are living in different parts of the country as some of the people we love and care about, or even, we may be at a friend's house, or we may be at school, and our teens, sending us a text, or we send them a text back, that investment in that relationship of thinking about them. Hey, I know you had your beep test in gym. and you're pretty stressed out about it because you want to do so well. How did that go? Can't wait to hear about it. Kiss, kiss. And just to let them know that we're here, we're far away, but we're still here and we've got them. Even when they're far away from us, they will feel that connection. They will feel part of that safety and stability. The comfort is the third C. And as we engage in communication, as we are connected, the comfort piece is so important when we're feeling all the time, but when we're feeling overwhelmed. If we're able to regulate ourselves, then we can help them in regulating, call that co-regulation. So, it might mean that, just putting our hand on their shoulder or their leg and saying, hey, I can see that your shoulders are really high, and I have a sense that your heart rate is going so fast. Is it okay if I put my hand right here? Because my heart is actually going pretty slow and I'm feeling pretty calm right now. That's not always the case, as we know, but right now that's how it's feeling. So maybe if I just do that, your heart will hear my heart and you'll be able to calm down. So by doing, small things like that, we can help do that by paying special attention, by providing a space that is comforting, knowing when to do and not to. So there's times when we may be called to provide comfort. And that is a day-to-day lesson for me that I think will keep going is I want to provide comfort for my boys and I want to be there when things are hard. I would love to fix it. I would never say that because we can't fix things. And as a trained therapist, it's definitely not something that I adhere to, but we want to make it better. And sometimes that's not what they need. That's not what they want. They need time alone. They need time to reach out to friends. They need to just let out steam. And so we need to read the signals, and it's okay to offer. And it's also important that we listen to the message back. So that's an important piece. And then special attention to bedtime. And I say that because that comes up all the time, that children seek attention at bedtime. And I put quotation marks because sometimes they may feel manipulative. And for me and the team here, we our reframing of that is that actually children are needing some soothing, some comforting, some presence. And a way that they get that sometimes is by crying for help or not being able to go to sleep or talking about something really hard that's happened, even if that was a long time ago. So you will have had that experience of that. They go to bed at night, they cry, they're really feeling upset, they're getting themselves really stressed out. And it could be something that happened during the day, but it could also be recalling something that's from a long time ago. And that's when it feels like it's a little manipulative, that they know that when they do that, you're going to pay attention. My advice, and it's not an easy one because we're all tired at the end of the day, is let's give them what they're seeking before they need to create a situation that will engage us in that. So willingly, we're going to create a bedtime routine, especially when we're reading the signs that things are a little harder. We're going to create a bedtime routine that is going to bring some connection and some comfort. And so if things come up and they say, I'm really upset about this, we have the connection and we have the presence to be able to say, I hear you. That must be so upsetting. I can feel that that's really bothering you. Let's put this thought or this question or this experience, let's write it down. Let's do something. Let's put it over here in the mason jar in this special box. And then we come back to it. Do you remember we said that every Thursday after school, we'd have like these cinnamon buns and hot chocolate, and we would open the box and look at the things that have bothered us during the week, and then we talk about that, and we find we just talk it out if that's all that's needed, or we start thinking about what do we need to do about them. So this is where it's going to go, and we're going to look at it in a little while. But for now, we're just going to focus on getting you ready and getting you settled to go to bed, and then we find the ways that lead to that. The children are going to feel supported. They're going to feel safe. They're going to feel like they're being heard and loved. And we're going to feel a little less frustrated because we're going to have a bit of a plan. And we'll know that that's what our evening will include. And we'll feel good for that as well. So we have a bit of a plan. I wanted to remind us about resilience and what it is. We hear a lot. I don't know about you, but we hear a lot. Children are resilient. All these things that are going on in the world. Children are resilient, as in they'll be fine, like because they're resilient. They're born with resiliency. The reality is they need the context to develop that resiliency. Some of us are born with a bit more resiliency than others. That's true. But the reality is this resiliency emerges out of safe and supportive relationships. We provide a context that allows them to be resilient. I don't allow them to have all the information. We're limiting that. We're making things predictable for them. So we're creating routines that are keeping them safe and they know what's happening next. That's often why children, even when really hard things are going on in their lives, when somebody's died or somebody's really sick at home, often there's the tension between wanting to be at home to pay attention to their people and needing that connection with their family. But there's also the wanting to be at school because there's predictability there. We know the routines, we know we're going to be asked this, and that feels safe and stable. And so children often want to go back to school. And then because we're there and we're helping the information that comes in, we're there to hold the big emotions. We're helping them control how big this is. And because we're doing that, and again, that's an evolving piece, they're able to develop that resiliency. And so just something for you for your back pocket when somebody says, oh yeah, your children are going to be fine. You know, kids are resilient. Just remember this, that you as a parent or a guardian or an adult in a child's world, you're making that resiliency possible. You're helping them to be resilient through your relationship with them that is safe and supportive. So something important to remember. So we're going to press pause. I'm just going to take a moment, because that was a lot of information and I don't know about your body. But even bringing all these pieces into our current reality can feel overwhelming. So the ways that we support them, we've talked about that all throughout this session here, but it's through support, that is setting up expectations for them, setting up some boundaries and routines so they know when the world feels like it's crumbling from under our feet, we need to find stable ground again. And that's our role. We get to give our children stable ground, and they can find it elsewhere as well. But that's our role as the main caregivers in their lives, is to give them some stable ground. And so that there's somewhere they go back and they feel safe. And so the routines are going to help with that, because when everything is up in the air, we need to know what we're doing. I know that many of us have talked about that when our children were home from homeschooled during COVID. Unless we were able to set some routines, we felt like things were all over the place, and we were struggling too when our children were struggling. So that's really important. Our children are floating. They're like untethered from all of this that's going on. So it's like we're helping them hang on to their parachute when the wind of everything. Somebody on our team talks about the parachute, and I love that analogy. When the wind of everything that's going on, all the information, all the stress and everything gets into the parachute and lifts you up from the ground, we get to be the people, the parents, the teachers, the uncles, the coaches, whoever is around this child gets to be part of the team that keeps pulling the parachute down and keeps helping them to walk along and take the air out of the parachute. That's part of the role that we play. We get to ask ourselves, what do I need? And we get to ask our children the same thing. What do you need in this moment? I often say that. In this moment, this is what I can see, or this is what I can think about. In this moment, this is what I need. And I'm giving myself space to handle whatever's going on in the moment. That doesn't mean that in an hour's time I'll feel the same way, but in this moment. So taking a screenshot, essentially, We do that all the time. Taking a screenshot of what it feels like right now, what I need. So what I need right now is just a moment. I'm just gonna go get a glass of water. Actually, I think that's gonna help me. Or just gonna go walk around. Or I need to go sit on the sofa and watch the show that I don't love, to cuddle with my son, because I feel like that's gonna make my heart rate go down, and I can sense that he feels that that's a gift to him as well. So we're just gonna do that. So what do we need in this moment? What do we need in the next hours, days, weeks? And then we get to be gentle to ourselves, and we get to also make some plans and pull in our resources, whether that's people or that's routines that we have. It's an exercise program that we've fallen off of, and we need to re-engage because that makes us feel good. So that's allows us um, to 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 design, in essence, to assess and design what we are needing. Um, there's also what distraction gets a bad rap. Often it's called denial. But distraction is a really great coping strategy. It can't be the only one, but it's a really great strategy to cope. So we distract ourselves by doing something else, by having conversations, by engaging in activities, hanging out with friends, having a laugh. That is very valid. So if your children are distracting themselves with other things, that's great. Just let's name it. And then let's make sure that there's also other strategies linked with that. But it really helps lighten things up and allow us to engage with the world and engage with what's coming at us. Shanna did a session earlier on self-compassion. It was in January, I think. That was the gift of, re-entering the world after a Christmas break. And so I invite you to be mindful and aware of your physical, emotional state, of the pain and distress that you may be feeling in this moment. I invite you to be kind to yourself and consider your own needs before you are able to engage with attending to others' needs. And remember that we're all in this together. We're not on the same boat, but we're facing similar storms. The common humanity sometimes is something that allows us to move forward, to feel like we're not alone, and that other people are struggling too. That can be really, really helpful. And reach out to some of the resources that we have, the past lunch and learns that we've put together. All the recordings are on the website. We have some written resources as well. And there's something I found, and that's on the Greater Good Science Center. I couldn't think of that. And it's called A Loving Space for Kids' Emotion. And it gives you a sort of step-by-step on how to do that. And I've been doing this work for a really long time, and I thought it was really, really helpful. So we'll put the link as well for you as something you may want to consider. And I wanted to end with this a quote. It just made me feel, as a parent and as someone who is engaged working with children for so many years, it just felt that what we're giving to them, we don't know how they're going to use it, how it's going to show up, and what their world is going to look like in the future. But we hope that there's some gift to it. And so Maria Popova wrote, "We make things and seed them into the world, never fully knowing, often never knowing at all, whom they will reach and how they will blossom in other hearts, how their meaning will unfold in contexts we never imagined."